how do each of you actually make an attempt to define what it means to be human? A light question.
We're just looking at each other. For me, there's the genetic, human from conception piece as one piece of it, living and unique, and not just your genes, but the dynamic processes that surround them, the turning on and off. A lot more to us, right, than just our genes. There's also the relationship of us. We live in relationship to the world, to each other, and I think to the one who is the mind behind it all. And that is where I think we derive our greatest fulfillment of being human.
So what I study is not so much what it is to be human as how people understand what it is to be human. And as I said, a lot of work in this area seems to be converging on the idea that there are these two different elements of what it is to be human, or what it is to be perceived as human. This element of agency and an element of experience. And I think you can see these two elements coming alive when you think about what it is to dehumanize someone, to treat someone as not truly human. And as you begin to reflect on it, you begin to see there are really two different ways of dehumanizing someone, of treating someone as not fully human. To treat them as not capable of agency, and to treat them as not capable of experience. So if you look at certain forms of racial prejudice, you see this kind of form of racial prejudice that involves animalizing people, treating them as though they're animals, treating them as though they just have a bunch of emotions, they're not capable of real reasoning or thinking or planning or self-control. And then you see another form of dehumanization that we might call mechanistic dehumanization, treating a human being as though that human being is just a mere machine or a computer, not capable of really having emotions, and hence not capable of experience. To truly treat someone as human is to recognize these two aspects of their humanity. The fact that they're capable of thinking, of reasoning, of self-control, but also the fact that they're capable of really feeling something, experiencing fear or love, or just even getting upset occasionally.
Can I ask?
Yes, go ahead.
So I see those as, frequently present. I agree with you about the dehumanizing. I've seen that a lot in autism too. But if a person lacks agency, they really do lack some ability to act. Let's say they're severely handicapped in that way for a while. Would you say they're not a person anymore? Okay. And same if they suddenly can't experience, if their emotion systems are defective, if they're consciously impaired, when they go unconscious or something, you wouldn't say they stop being a human.
No,
either, right?
What I'm saying is more that in our ordinary notion of what it is to be human, when we treat someone as sort of having full humanity, it's that we're sort of treating them as having both of these things.
Right.
The kind of people that you're thinking of, I think people often treat really poorly, that they do treat them in a dehumanizing way. It's because people aren't recognizing their full humanity.
But would you say those are sufficient for being human?
Oh, to have both of them is to be human. It's an interesting question. Of course, you could imagine some other species that has both of these things. What do you think about that question?
Well, we are building robots and agency that have some agency and that have some aspects of experience, right? But not just, substantially different from ours. So I think we could probably craft something that you could get people in the questionnaire. When you make it look a little bit more like a human, you can make those two bars look more similar, but I still don't think it's a human.
But I think that, I see what you're saying, but even though if we looked at the bars, they'd be sort of creeping up, I still feel there's some sense that people would always have, that I think you really articulated very well in your introductory remarks, this sense that even if we'd say to some degree that this robot is correctly described as having emotions, it lacks this special sauce. And then maybe we would disagree about how we should understand that fact about ourselves, the fact that we always have that intuition, but I think you're exactly right to say that we have it. That no matter how much the robot improved in its technology, we'd always feel like there was some special sauce lacking in it.
I think that's an interesting point, and you may have already addressed this question, but another thing that came to mind as both of you were talking was just the aspects of animals in general. So you talked a lot about the emotion and interacting with the robot, especially in some of the examples that Dr. Card gave. And it actually made me think of the way that people interact with pets. So you do have some, emotive response from the pet, even the droopy ears and all that whole aspect. And then even personally as a researcher, when we do research in various animal models, I mean, you can give examples from rodents all the way up to primates, and you can see aspects of emotion in those pieces as well. So again, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about to what extent animals also have some of this agency and experience, and again, what's the step that differentiates humans from animals that may have some of these aspects as well?
You go first.
Well, I think the point that you make is exactly right, that when you separate these two aspects of our ability to understand things as having minds, you can see that human beings think of animals as having one of these aspects of mind without the other. So when we think about an animal, we think that the animal is capable of feeling pain, capable of feeling fear, and so forth, truly capable of having experience. But at the same time, we think there's something that human beings are capable of that these animals aren't. Capable of self-control, careful reasoning, acting morally, and so forth. And so one way in which we can dehumanize certain people is actually precisely the opposite one of the one I mentioned of treating a human being like a robot. And I think that's what you see actually coming out when we think of people, especially in terms of their bodies. That when we think of a person in terms of their embodiment, there's one way in which we're doing something good, seeing them as being capable of these kinds of states that a robot could never have. But there's another way in which we're doing something really bad. We're thinking about the human being more as being something like an animal than as being something like a true, full-fledged human being. And it's for that reason that we're decreasing our attribution of agentic states to that human being. So just as you don't want to be treated as a robot, you don't want to be other people to treat you like an animal. It's only when the two things are put together to achieve our sort of full humanity that you are being treated in the way, with a kind of respect and also with compassion that you would hope to be treated.
I'm thinking of this cartoon one of my students drew. And the first panel, Master shows up at the door at home at the end of the day, and his dog greets him with happy, waggy tail. I don't know how many of you have dogs. The dog looks really happy to see you. And the next panel, but the Master looks really unhappy, like he's had a really bad day. And the next panel, the dog is looking at Master with his ears back and his tail down and hunched over. And in the next panel, Master's noticing dog doing that. And dog mirroring him, like showing a kind of dog empathy. And in the next panel, they both look happy again. Now, that whole transaction, for those of you who have a dog, happens faster than it took me to explain it right there. And some would describe it as their dog knows their feelings and cares about them, and who knows, that may be possible. It also may be that the dog has just learned that he gets fed faster if he behaves this way. I hear different stories from cat owners. I've never had a cat. My mom hated cats. But I have seen people attribute elaborate feelings and cognitions to their pets. And I don't know how much of that is justified or is kind of inferred in a rigorous way versus wishful thinking. We have done some studies with some measurements and monkey brains and with the physiology we've measured, and we are seeing some things that are quite interesting and similar to some things we see in people. So I think it's a fascinating world to have an open mind about, and for those people who have pets they love, you're not alone. There's certainly a lot of really smart people who participate in assigning that intent to them.
So one last question before we open up to questions from the audience, but you guys have alluded to this special sauce. And so obviously it's difficult to scientifically quantitate or measure the special sauce. And even
a tablespoon of special sauce.
Yeah. I guess you could measure it anyway. But even when we talk about the existence of God, so how do you think, from each of your perspectives, what's the best, or not even the best, but in your own experiences, way to evaluate that aspect of the special sauce and the existence, particularly of a creator, in terms of how we think about these questions that we've been talking about tonight?
You go first.
Well, I'm really interested to hear your opinions, but so to begin with, I just want to say that I feel the pull of this idea just as strongly as other people do. So when I look at my daughter, who's just 2.5 years old, and I see the way in which she's behaving, my heart goes out to her, and I could never and I feel so strongly that she couldn't possibly be just a bunch of molecules, or that whatever she's doing couldn't ever be something that could just be understood by researchers in cognitive neuroscience. I feel so strongly that there's some kind of special magic going on here. But although I have that feeling, I'm not sure that I should trust that feeling that I have. I feel that thing very strongly, just as everyone else does, but I have a lack of faith in my own feeling, that I feel like as I begin to understand more and more what it is within my own mind that generates that feeling, the more I begin to understand it, the more I begin to feel that it's suspect, that this might be leading us astray, and that it might be the case that what's really happening in these cases is that these purely scientific theories are actually capturing the way human beings are, but that there's something about my own mind that will leave me with a kind of intuition, an immediate automatic reaction that will always reject what those scientific theories say.
I share that too. I'm going to take a different tack to this question. I'm going to kind of think out loud here for a minute. This is dangerous. So I build computers, software agents. I collaborate on building robots. If I were to build some robots that would be, like my children, like Cynthia Feltwood-Kismet going in the museum, and they were to say, I'd go off to another planet and be autonomous and have agency and have a little bit of experience so they don't hurt themselves, right? You want them to experience something akin to pain and so forth so they don't get injured. I think I would want them to know that they were made by humans. I would think I might want to put something inside them so that even though they maybe didn't need to communicate with us, they might actually want to communicate with us. I think I might put inside them maybe some little program, and maybe we call it the SS program or something, that causes them to want to show, some more than acknowledgement toward what we did in bringing them into being. And why would I want that? I don't know, just part of the pleasure of making them, and in a sense we've kind of made them in our image, right? So there's an interesting role reversal here. And I think as we think of like why we have this in us, is this a feeling we can't trust, it's not real? Or maybe it's real, actually. Maybe there is something there. And just because we can't explain it with material stuff now doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a future explanation that is completely as satisfactory as our scientific material explanations now.